I'll be honest, I don't even know if I can talk about this. Or if I should. Welcome back to my channel. Hello everyone, how are you doing? Today, I'm gonna talk about something that is probably the most scarring and traumatizing experience in my life. Probably number one by a mile. So back in 2020, I got fired from my job. So here's what happened. I worked at an international NGO that will not be named that has an office in Quezon City. And my job was to run one of its programs and manage the volunteers and the different activities that go along with it. So the job description was pretty clear. In fact, I was even a part-time employee. I wasn't even full-time. But guys, the load was crazy. I would even work on weekends and sometimes would stay up like 11 to manage some of the activities that came with the program. But because I believed in the NGO and I believed in the volunteers, I really wanted to support them. And I liked my team, although the team wasn't very big. I stuck around and I really tried to grind it out. The problem with basically any job, I suppose, or most of the time, was the person in charge of me. And it just so happened that the person in charge of me was the overall director, was the overall leader of the whole NGO. So basically, he was the guy for everything. There were red flags very early on that I noticed. So just for context, this job is already my third as of that time. So I had my first full-time job coming out of graduation, and then one that I had before the pandemic started, and then this job is the one that I got during the pandemic. So the red flags were there early on. He would set meetings and he would be late for the meetings that he set. He would set deadlines for certain things that would require his approval, but he would give his approval late or last minute. The signs were there. So that was the first few weeks even. That wasn't even like the first month, guys. So they were all there. And I thought that maybe it's just the first few weeks, maybe he is just adjusting. But as I was asking around the very small team, so there weren't a lot of people to ask on how this person really does work. It turns out that that's kind of a pattern, and it bothered me because when I need to do things, often it would require the input of our volunteers, and our volunteers aren't paid. Our volunteers have their own lives, of course. So if the approvals and the feedback were late, then yes, it affects me, but it affects them much more because revisions have to be done by them. Then they'd have to stop whatever they're doing and go back to revising. So here's what happened. I reached 1 month in that part-time job, and I basically asked for feedback about how I was doing. And this person basically said I was doing a good job, flat out. And so I asked if I could offer some feedback to that person, and he obliged. So I started naming all of these things and even asked him, so how can we, for example, for like deadlines, how can we play around your schedule? Like what days or times will you be most accessible so that we don't disturb you and we can reach your deadlines better? He started giving all of these things, and I really thought that, hey, this is going somewhere, this is going to be good. Famous last words. A few days later, I got a notice. I got an invite for another feedback session. And basically, anything that could be thrown against me was thrown against me in that feedback session. And after that feedback session, there were 2 other notices about me doing certain violations that, number 1, was never communicated to me that they were rules because we don't even have a handbook of rules. And number 2, like, they're really just bad. And if you ask anyone, are they grounds to terminate someone? Hell no. Long story short, on a Saturday where I was still working, by the way, I got an email saying that I've been terminated. And here are the 4 lessons I gleaned from that experience. If you want to know more about the story, slide into my DMs, maybe. Number 1, power matters. And I will start off by saying that I completely disagree with this, but it's how the world works. networks. I think that especially when you're working, what you can say, when you can say it, how you say things, and to whom you can say things to are greatly influenced by the current power you have in the organization. Of course, it goes without saying that as you get higher and higher in the ranks, the power that you have also increases. But there is also a perspective of what are your networks in your company or in your organization, and who can back you up and support you for different matters. As a team of 4, 5, pushing it 6, there wasn't a lot of networks for me or support for me in terms of power. Obviously, in power, I was already at a lower level because I was reporting to someone higher. And so I think one of the variables that really made that person pop off was because maybe, this is a hypothesis, he felt that when I was giving feedback, that I was not in a place to do so, that I was just 1 month into the job, and who the hell are you to say all of these things about me? It's a hypothesis that I have. But in general, while I do disagree that people should earn their right to speak because psychological safety is very important, I don't think we benefit from a lot of organizations being subscribed to that kind of philosophy. So power matters. Number one, be aware of how much power you hold. There are people who are influential in the organization, even if they're in a lower position, but they're completely unaware, and that they actually influence thoughts and behaviors of people without them knowing so. So I think the first step is to figure out how much power do I hold. And second, once you've identified how you are in the organization, then you can figure out where do I want to go next, what spheres of influence do I want to create, and to what extent do I want to exercise my power. If it means meeting new people from other departments, or sucking up to your manager, or sucking up to the manager of your manager, whatever that means, having an awareness of where you are and getting a picture of where you want to go gives you an idea of how you want to navigate your work situation. For me, I think where it misfired was, as low in power, there weren't a lot of people to back me up, at least explicitly. And so when it came down to it, I got the full force of authoritarian power. I don't know. Number 2 is, I think, the give and take process of feedback. We often hear that feedback is important, and from where I stand, I think feedback comes in 2 separate categories. So there's the feedback as the giver, and then there's the feedback as the receiver. So let's talk about feedback as the giver from my experience. So from my experience, I think what I did right was to ask if I could give feedback, and I was given permission to do so. And I think this is very important because sometimes we give feedback when it's not asked for, or we give feedback when the person that we want to talk to is not in a disposition to be receptive of that feedback. So we have to set the environment so that the feedback we give becomes useful and beneficial. And I think asking for permission is the way to do so. So I think I did that right. Number 2, what I also think I did right was to speak candidly. If it were a scientific journal, it would literally be, here are my observations. And there was no judgment. It was just seeing this is what happened. I am half sold about this method, but I think the takeaway here is to take away the judgment as much as possible when you're giving the feedback, and just basically talking about the behaviors or the things that you'd like to be changed. Granted, maybe for this time, these are personal habits. I'm not sure. So maybe that's why it went down wrong, perhaps. But I think focusing on the act and not on the person is the way to give feedback. Again, this is not a scientific study or whatever. That's personally how I view things now based on this experience. And number 3 is, as a giver of feedback, is to offer a way to meet halfway or to find solutions. So in my case, I asked, how do we adjust around your timeline so that you don't have to give feedback at a later time or to give approvals at a later time? He literally gave me days and times to talk to him where he said he would respond quickly, which didn't happen. But the point here is, you don't give feedback just because. You're giving feedback because you want to reach a situation where it works out well for everyone. I think we sometimes get caught in the, I'm going to give feedback part without building on that and creating new behaviors and new norms and changes that will help the both of you get to your desired state. Where I fell wrong here, really not sure. Probably that I wasn't patient enough, but I did check in with the people who were left behind that organization when I was terminated, and that person hasn't really changed, at least as far as I know. So I guess it'd be like that. On the flip side, on feedback being on the receiver end, and I think this is where I would hypothesize a lot of my problems came from. Number one is to not take it personally. This is assuming that you are in a disposition where you were informed that you're going to get feedback. You consented into receiving the feedback. Don't take it personally. Feedback, when given well, it's about helping you out, and in helping you, help everyone else, because that's kind of how organizations work. So don't take it personally. And number two, just be open to it. I think that giving feedback is a tenuous situation or a tenuous scenario for a lot of us, because I don't think we ever grew up in a society, aka the Philippines, or in schools where we were taught how to receive feedback or how to view feedback. Growing up, when we give feedback to our parents, we would get told off because we're answering back to our parents, which is so boomer, by the way. Parents shape up. And in school, there isn't really a lot of room for conversation around feedback. If you've had those, congratulations. But for most of the time, what we would normally get are just remarks. Then there are no more conversations. So the invitation as a receiver of feedback is to just be open to it. Suspend your judgment and don't say anything. Just take it as it is first and try to digest and understand where the other person is coming from. I think that feedback, when done well, really benefits everyone. And I think what happened here was, at least from my perspective, I've done nothing too wrong. It might have been the problem on the receiving end. Number three, and one that I'm very, very proud of, is to exercise your no muscles. In other words, learn how to push back. I think one of the things that we struggle with as people in general is to say no and say, I don't want to do that, I can't do that, I shouldn't be doing that. And the whole premise, I suppose, of me getting fired was because I said no. I basically told my manager, these behaviors are unacceptable, it affects me and it affects the volunteers, and it should stop. This is the effect. Obviously, I hope that no one else experiences what I went through. But I am proud that I am able to push back on the things that shouldn't be happening to begin with. And I do know that after my departure, there were some things that marginally got better precisely because of that conversation or the feedback that I gave. So it's a small win, but I would like to think that that place got a bit better because of everything that happened. That won't be possible if put your head down and just say yes to everything. So exercise your no muscles. If you don't want to do something, something is wrong, push back. It doesn't have to be in the big things. It can just be like, give me a hug. Sorry, I don't really feel like giving you a hug right now. Can I call? Sorry, I'm not in the mood to take a call right now. I think these small things can build up to the bigger things. Like saying, hey boss, I'm really uncomfortable with how you treat me. But we have to build that habit, we have to build that courage, and we have to build that idea in our head that saying no and pushing back is normal. Number four, something that we all need to hear, especially during these times, is mentally we recover. That's just how our mind works. I'm not too sure of what day it was or when it was exactly, but there was just a day when I woke up and I just told myself, we're okay already. Because prior to that, I've literally avoided applying for jobs. Even when I did, I was looking for very specific things. I would ask about how the manager is. Probably got traumatized and I didn't want another manager like that. Or asking things like, how's the workload? Will it push me to work on the weekends and work till 11 p.m., etc. Unconsciously, I found anything and everything to prevent me or to make it harder for me to find a job and just avoid the topic altogether until that one day when I just woke up and said, it's okay. I guess that's a reminder for all of us that no matter what you're going through, it's a bad chapter. It's not a bad story. it's a bad day, it's not a bad life. Or maybe it's a bad week, but it's still not a bad life. Even when it's a bad month, it's still not a bad life. Trust your mind or brain is so powerful that it will find ways for us to recover, but it is built in within us to recover from setbacks. We just need to give ourselves time and an opportunity to find ourselves and get ourselves together. We just need to take care of the basic things: eat, sleep, take a walk, drink water. Your mind will slowly find itself recovering. With everything that's happened, I think it's one of the reasons why I got pushed in self-employment. Although I do still have managers and bosses that I report to today, but I am extremely grateful that they're nothing like that one. One last thing I want to leave with you as I end the video is that employment today has evolved, and the models of yesterday wherein have to climb the ladder doesn't necessarily apply anymore today. There are various ways of finding work and creating work that were not as accessible before. And in terms of the work environment, there are greater demands, and it is okay for you to demand better treatment, better pay, better culture, better everything, because it's a new world. If you're having a hard time finding a job because your standards are high, just think of it as finding a place that you want to stay in, and you're finding a place that you will really develop in. Of course, it's hard. Sometimes we just need to suck things up and just take the bullet. But please try to find wins wherever you can, even if you are finding yourself compromising in some factors. Let's just not take total L's when we're in our jobs. Conversely, if you do want to take a plunge into self-employment or being a content creator, for example, or being an entrepreneur, there are many resources available today that will help you be successful, or at least just start. So don't be afraid. It's a new world. It welcomes innovation, it welcomes creativity, and you are very, very welcome to start. Live audaciously and tirelessly chase the best version of yourself. See you next time.